The world didn't give it to me. Oh, this joy that I have. The world didn't give it to me. Don't you know that? This joy that I have. The world didn't give it to me. Oh, I said the world didn't give it. The world can't take it away. Oh, this strength that I have, this strength that I have. This strength that I have. Oh, yeah, now. The world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it to me. This strength that I have. Oh, yeah, the world didn't.
Hi, folks. My name is Tyler Colburn. I am the professional development consultant here at the Nova Scotia College of Social Workers. I'm just going to share my screen. And thank you, Terry, for playing that music as people joined. I always forget that you can do that. And I'm like, what a nice gift as people enter into a space. It's one of those hosting things that I would think about in person, but online, I'm just like, oh, share the screen, get moving. So thank you for welcoming people with the music. We are here today for Black Joy and Helping and Healing Practices. It's March 27th, Friday. The year is going so quickly. I don't know how it is, but we're here and we're on into the territory of spring, or the time of spring, even though it's snowing right now here in Punamukajik or Dartmouth. We are joined by Terry Bresner, a former colleague of mine, current friend, probably forever friend, have lots of laughs, who'll be leading us through this session. I will do the opening and the framing and land acknowledgement, but then I'll pass over to Terry. We're also joined by three amazing social workers, Lana McLean, Bria Simons, and Kaija Benton. I'm so grateful that they're both, all three of them, all four of you are here to engage in this conversation today. I am going to get started with a land acknowledgement. I want to begin by acknowledging that I'm presenting from Punamukajik, colonially known as Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I'm really grateful to live here as a settler Canadian on these lands, and it is located on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. The inherent rights of the Mi'kmaq were recognized in the Peace and Friendship Treaty signed with the Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and Passamaquoddy peoples from 1725 to 1779. And this series of treaties did not surrender Indigenous land, resources, or sovereignty to the British Empire, but instead established rules for an ongoing relationship between nations. Canada later reaffirmed the treaties in Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982, and they remain active to this day. So, I see lots of folks on the call. We have about 42 people at the moment. I imagine you're calling in from all over Mi'kmaq. I know we have some folks joining, I think one person from the UK. But wherever you're calling in from, I invite you to consider the land that you're on, the original people of this land, and how this awareness of the land and the original people of the land contributes to the session today. And as we think about a land acknowledgement, it's important to recognize that the land doesn't need our acknowledgement. What we strive to do in these moments is to demonstrate and outline our accountabilities to the land and the people of this land. And so I'm borrowing here from Janice Brooks. There's a link here. I'll share the link to the slideshow in a bit, but I encourage you to check out this LinkedIn post. And she has an embedded report that, critiques and expands upon land acknowledgements. And she offers these three questions. What does it mean to dedicate my career to the land while working on Indigenous territories? How have Western systems of science shaped how I understand or overlook Indigenous knowledge? What responsibilities come with the benefits I have received in this place? So as we move through today's session, I invite you to just take a critical stance and think about the ways that we can support in solidarity Indigenous resistance and resurgence. And if you're a settler Canadian like myself, to invite some sense of curiosity of what that accountability and responsibility looks like. I also want to acknowledge our commitment at the college to reparations for people of African descent. I want to start by highlighting the theme from this year's African Heritage Month, which was strength and unity, moving forward with purpose, prosperity, power, and progress. And so it's really important, to consider the ways we can work in solidarity and alignment with people of African descent, and consider, how do we embrace African heritage and futures every day of the year, not just in February. And we're thinking, specifically here in Mi'kmaq, many times about people of African descent who are historical African Nova Scotians who have legacies and ancestries with the Black Loyalists, Maroons, and the Southern American Black refugees. And thinking a lot about the ways that African Nova Scotians and people of African descent have shaped our political, our economic, and our cultural landscape here in Mi'kmaq. And for us, reparations looks like these five things: restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. And when thinking about this concept of Black joy, especially as a white person myself, I'm thinking a lot about what does it mean to resource Black joy? Not that Black joy only has to exist in resistance or in contrast to oppression. Black joy in the futures that I'm imagining is something that is supported and resourced and affirmed through all of our systems and relationships. And I wanted to share this quote from Ubuntu-centered practice. When thinking about Black joy, I'm thinking about Black joy in the ways that it shows up in our relationships. I really love this quote. She writes, "Because we deserve a society built for us all, without othering, minoritizing, or pushing anyone to the margins of oppression, I stand for anti-oppressive practice, intersectionality, equity, and every path that fosters collective liberation and communal wellness. Anti-oppressive practice is inherently intersectional, resisting all isms, inequities at the micro, meso, and macro levels. We get free together, united as one family, one human family, pardon me. Let's resist and rebel against divide and conquer tactics." So in thinking about Black joy, I'm thinking about liberation and Black futures and allied futures. For members of the college, just a reminder that you can track this 2-hour session under anti-racism and anti-discriminatory practice or formal professional development. And of course, with every learning activity that we do have objectives. So we're hoping that you develop or shift some knowledge, skills, and values in this session today. And because this session is really rooted in a conversation between the folks on the call, recognizing that learning happens in all kinds of different ways. And so you might have shifts or developments in knowledge, skills, or values aligned with these objectives, or you might have things that we haven't predicted or thought of. And of course, this is grounded in our code of ethics, specifically value 1, respecting the dignity and worth of all people, promoting social justice, and then valuing human relationships. Also want to just let folks know, you might have already noticed, we have the chat functionality turned off, your microphone functionality turned off, and your video functionality turned off. We will later in the session have time for sense making and relationship building, but the priority for the first part of the session is really hearing the wisdoms and insights of Kaeja, Bria, and Lana, and Terry for the session. So you're invited to be here as a witness, as an observer, and maybe park or hold on to any desires to build community or make connections for now, but we will have space for that coming up. Terry, I want to pass it over to you and just want to double check again. I think I've already forgotten. Do you want me to continue sharing screen for now, or do you want to? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
I'm going to go off camera and off microphone, but I'm here. You can send me a message or just say my name if you need anything. Thank you so much for holding the space today.
Yes. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you all. Thank you, Tyler, for the invitation, and so excited to be in conversation with Lana, Bria, and Kaeja. I am arriving. Yeah, I was hearing that piece around resourcing Black joy, and personally this week have felt a little under-resourced in my body, but in preparing for this and the conversations that we've had together among us in preparation has already infused me back with excitement and energy. So I'm excited for what will unfold. And so I want to spend some time just welcoming you all formally. We're framing this conversation today around the metaphor of the kitchen table. So, the kitchen table is a place for many of us, Black folks in community and family, where we go. It's a sacred place and a sacred time we get to spend together with delicious food, delicious conversation. And today we are metaphorically inviting you to that table in conversation. And so I want to take a moment just to set the table and see what is here. At the center of our table today is Black joy, one of my favorite things. And on our menu, I was so inspired. Lana brought in this beautiful way of talking about we're gonna have our appetizer and then our main course. I was like, yes, absolutely. So I'm fully into the metaphor. So just what's on our menu, aka the agenda, we are gonna start with an experience of Black joy embodiment. So just some reflection on that. Inviting you to land here and arrive in a moment of Black joy. And then for our main course, we're going to be at the table, aunties in conversation on Black joy. And then we will have a moment for digestive rest. So you will have a bit of a bio break to let that goodness sink in. And then for dessert, we will have table talk. So this is what Tyler was mentioning, where we'll move into small groups to really share together about what's coming up for us related to the conversation that's unfolded. And then, of course, at the end of every meal, we grab our Tupperwares. What are we taking away? What's the good nourishment we're taking back with us? So we'll share together some insights and reflections of what we experience. So yeah, with that, want to invite you all in. You'll be hearing this conversation on Black joy, witnessing stories and reflections, and and just naming that can evoke a lot of different experiences. So joy can both bring up healing and connection, and it can also feel vulnerable and at times inaccessible. And so we're welcoming all of the different ways that might be showing up, and for you to notice that, and to really come into this space to be around the table with awareness and responsibility. So really noticing what is your positionality in relationship to this conversation, and to show up to the table with that in mind. So on our next slide, I'll just share a couple of invitations. So when you come over to our house, what are we inviting you into? So our first invitation is to be our guest and act accordingly. So that is an invitation to witness, to notice in your body, to observe, and to participate. So again, for the first portion or so, you'll be with us in that relationship, witnessing and noticing, observing, and later on have an opportunity to participate, and to just know, in the ways that we show up, we're all arriving here, arriving here as we are, as people living in the system and knowing the system lives in us. So particularly for folks who are non-Black, really bringing that awareness of how some of those pieces of unconscious bias is arriving in the space, noticing discomfort, and for all of us knowing that this is not a therapeutic space that is specifically designed for healing or processing, but that may also occur here, and to really invite you all to take care of your needs as they arise. And how you arrive, we invite you to be here with your body. So again, really noticing sensations that come up, vulnerability, really paying attention as we move through this together. And as a guest, what can you bring? We invite you to bring your presence, your curiosity, humility, vulnerability, and accountability as you listen and are in relationship and conversation later on. And then what might you receive from this? So taking away some insights, some connections, and prepared for loving correction. So the invitations in moments where if something is happening, we will name harm or attempt to impact with loving correction. So that is how we are arriving today. So with that, we will move into it. Tyler, I'll actually take over sharing for this portion. And what I'm going to do is play a clip for you all. For those who are familiar, we're going to play a clip from the movie Sinners, which won many Oscars this year, and is a beautiful movie. And this scene is a scene featuring the juke joint. So it's a movie about two brothers in Mississippi in the 1920s, and they come to town and build a juke joint, which is a space for Black folks to gather. And you will see some of what happens there. So as you watch, inviting you to notice what is coming up in your body. And I'll share the screen.
It's magic what we do.
Yeah.
It's sacred. It's big.
There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past.
Somebody take me
And the future.
Somebody take me in your arms tonight. Oh. Somebody take me.
Witnessing our ritual. We heal our people. And we be free.
Yeah. So inviting you all to just take a breath in together. Just noticing what is present in your body right now. Having witnessed one expression of Black joy, seeing the connection, improvisation, rhythm, bodily expression, community. Notice what's in your body after watching that. Sensations are present. There's warmth, tightness, energy, stillness, or maybe nothing at all. Just noticing what's there. And this is one expression of Black joy. And there are so many, but noticing that Black joy can live in moments like this of connection, that improvise, the community. And that scene at the end of really representing that it is not separate from struggle, but in defiance of it. That being a place that exists alongside struggle. And I want to name just that we are not all in the same relationship to what we saw and what we will experience today. And in watching that, if you're Black, this watching that, maybe it feels familiar or resonant or complex. And you might recognize something in yourself that's lived and inherited and longed for it. Like for me, it really, invokes so much seeing the music and the movement and feeling that in my body. And notice what is true for you. And if you're not Black, noticing and witnessing that this is something that is not yours to claim, but to be in relationship with. And so inviting you to notice again, what of that is drawing you in? Where do you feel distant? And what might you not understand? And I want to invite you to just bring attention back to your body and notice if there's any small way that your body wants to move to respond to what you just witnessed. Maybe it's a shift, breath, or a small movement. I'm feeling the shoulder roll myself. Be small and true. So today across virtual space, we are practicing together, witnessing Black joy, feeling our way into relationship with it, and noticing what it asks of us. And that, beyond understanding, how are we holding our relationship to that, to respect, to protect, to resource Black joy. So I want to just invite you into a moment of personal reflection now, so you can, if journaling is good for you, or you want to kind of move your body, or in whatever ways you're wanting to reflect, I invite that. And I will share some reflection questions in the chat in a moment. And so the invitation to reflect is, what moments of joy or aliveness stood out to you in this scene? What helps you feel safe enough to express joy openly, and what gets in the way? How do you understand your relationship to what was witnessed? And what is the intention you have for showing up in right relationship to Black joy today? So I'll give you a few moments to reflect on that. And I'll play some music if you want to journal in the meantime. A good time to reflect on those questions. And we'll invite more of that in conversation during our dessert. But for now, our amuse-bouche to get a little taste to our main course. I'm so excited to be here at the table with the wonderful Lana, Bria, and Kaisha, and so excited to be in conversation with you all. yeah, and to break some bread together and share around your reflections and experiences of Black joy. And so really wanting to hold this as a conversation that is flowing. So we have some themes and prompts prepared, but really here in the embodiment with what is alive and what emerges. And so we'll be in conversation together and see what's at our table. But I'd love for each of us to introduce ourselves through this lens of Black joy, of sharing maybe what are some of our earliest memories of Black joy, what comes to mind when you hear that, where did you learn Black joy from? And yeah, and I'll invite in Lynn, I see you ready.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation and everyone who's on the meeting today. Thank you for your generous spirit to be with us at this table. Um, I just came back from vacation, so I didn't get a chance to do an amazing collage. So I went through my phone and picked out a few pictures that bring me Black joy. So I'm not sure people can see them, but this is me celebrating my 7th birthday. I was raised by my grandmother, and for some folks who may know, I was raised in foster care from the ages of 7 till 21. So this is my foster family, the Hunts. So I believe my joy is really rooted in my family of origin, my maternal paternal family, but also my foster family, the Hunts, and my family of choice, which you'll see some pictures of. And these are my girlfriends. Black women bring me joy. I think we're phenomenal human beings, and spending time with each other with truth and honesty, it grows us, it stretches us. This is the same group of some of those women. We're in Jamaica. We love to travel. Travel brings me joy. And I like to travel to countries where culture is rich and alive, particularly African centered culture. So that was Jamaica. It brings me joys to be with and in spaces where there's I connect to the earth, and so walking. I'm not a runner. I don't run, but I love a good walk in nature. I love Black love, and so this is my one of my girlfriends, Cynthia, getting married to her partner, her now Cedric. Um, what also brings me Black joy is knowing that from a social justice perspective, as a social worker, Black folks are just embedded in resiliency and resistances. And it's something that we share cross generation. And so there's a quote that getting the most out of life isn't about how much you keep for yourself, but how much you pour into others. So this is one of my little Lana-isms by David Stoddard. Again, these are my people. This is my husband, Thane, and my daughter, Ella. We were in Greece last year. Travel is about restoration for me. This is some of my cool friends. We were in Montreal last year for the Jazz Festival, and just it was day drinking. I never heard of the term until last year, but we were day drinking, having a good time. Music, and I really appreciate that. Montreal Jazz Festival just brings joy to me. So this is PJ Morton. So listening to music with people who have an appreciation for diversity in music. So jazz is one of them. This is my daughter and my sister Nancy. We're celebrating my sister Nancy's 60th birthday down in Guysborough County. I love the water. So I've taken up sailing. So I was on sailing in the Bador Lakes. It's a privilege to be on water and to be in water. It's just a refreshing and renewing for me. I am a woman of God, and so my faith is really important to me. So my church family is another extension of my table. And I always like to say that Black liberation theology is rooted in resistance, resilience, and social justice. So this Holy Week coming up for me is really important. And so I saw this little thing scroll. It says, "When life isn't a bed of roses, remember who wore the thorn of crowns." So that's just my faith. My girlfriends, most of them are social workers, a couple of lawyers up in that crowd. And I love the holidays. I'm a bit of a Christmas hoe. And so those are some of the little pieces that bring me joy. And they're intentional because for me, time is something I value. So I spend my time with people who pour into me and I can pour into them. There's reciprocity. And in reciprocity is rest. In reciprocity is social movements, because around kitchen tables and around meaningful relationships with other people is where you find the strength to go to the next level. And I think we saw that recently with in the African Nova Scotian community, in the arts community, in the Indigenous community, when we all collectively said, and resounded our voices collectively and individually and socially around the recent budget and some of the changes. So I think resiliency and Black joy are kissing cousins. I think of rest and Black joy are kissing cousins. So, you know how Black folks say, "That's my cousin," even though we don't know what's up, cuz. It's because we are so interconnected to each other, and that's where Black joy is sacred. I didn't put food there yet because I just couldn't decide what's my favorite meal. I just like food. So for me, Black joy comes in the land of fives. I say, don't play with my faith, my family, my finances, food, or my friends, or I'll F you up. Those are my land of fives. And they are all part of the envelope of my joy, including just the opportunity to share with others. So thank you for indulging me in my quick little collage.
Thank you, Lana. So many beautiful elements of joy. Feeling, I'm also like, are we the same person? Yes, all those pieces. And I'll invite in Kai to share, yeah, what does Black joy look like for you at your table from your memories? And Tyler, if you don't mind to share the slides here.
Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kaija, and I thought I would just share some photos. There's definitely a lot more, definitely a lot of people who aren't in these photos who bring me joy, but we'd be here for a long time, and I need abundance of slides. So, I just wanted to just give, a little taste. So first we have my grandmother, um, Mrs. Bowden, and myself and my partner. And so my grandmother is the matriarch of our family, and literally, raised me from a little girl. And, we'll get to this, but whose stories and whose strength, and just perseverance to move forward in life, even at the age of 97, brings me joy, and gives me something to look forward to. Um, Next, there's a picture of me and my sister. This is, us back in the day. But this photo was actually taken, I think, at Nanny's. And so just seeing, my sister, she's my only sister and someone who, I look up to, and, despite, the challenges, we're 18 months apart, so I'd be lying if I said we didn't, have our fights, but just to be able to see how we've grown and how our relationship has grown just brings me joy. On the next photo, me and my sister with my niece and my nephew, Kalea and JJ. These are two of the individuals who bring me joy and is the reason why I keep pushing forward. One of the reasons why I keep pushing forward, even when, the world is feeling very heavy and I want to give up. Um, I have on the bottom left here, this is when I got engaged. And so my family and friends, um, really indirectly bring me joy just through their support. The next photo here is this is my family in the States. So my dad is American. So my grandmother is here. My grandfather unfortunately passed away, but he still lives within me. Next is my mother. We joke, and no, it's not really a joke, it's actually true. I've been critically reflecting as a social worker ever since I was in her womb. And, I feel personally that I am the individual that I am today, because of her, through her legacy, through her parenting, and through just being such an amazing mom, and my best friend, and always there for me. And then we have me and my sister and my dad. Um, you know, Me and my dad, we've had, a rough go, but I mean, my dad, when I was a child and still now, brings me joy. And working on our relationship also brings me joy to look forward to the future. Um, Also, the photo here is me and Bria. And, what a privilege and an honor to be like on a panel with Bria and Lana. Um, but the friendship that I have with Bria, and I was thinking about it, Bria, it's so hard the only word, one of the words that I can say is just healing. Like whether it's we don't get to talk that much, we just get to talk or we just get to see each other. I just feel a breath of fresh air and healing no matter what I'm going through. And even on that day, I think when I graduated with my master's, I told Bria last minute and she showed up with flowers, showed up and was able to watch me and her other friends. And it just made my day and helped me move forward as I was in a challenging time. Food brings me joy as well. Singing in my church, my faith brings me joy. Um, Singing for me is self-care and is healing, especially when I'm singing and ministering through music and really being able to feel the words that I'm singing and really see my growth. So yeah, that's a little snippet of me. Oh, one thing. You know, in the past couple months, actually, recently, I've lost some folks in my family. So I've lost a little Izzy here. I don't know if you can see, but the little baby here unfortunately passed away, and she still lives within me. And my cousin who just recently passed away. And we'll talk about this, but it's just so powerful how Black joy can still show up even when we're going through a lot, going through loss, going through grief. So I just really want to pay remembrance to them and all the other folks who have passed away, but they also, through their legacy and them being near and dear to my heart as I go through this world, also brings me joy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Kaisha, and bringing all these folks to the table with you and spotlighting your connection also with Bria. We'll shift over to you, Bria.
Hi, folks. Are people can hear me? Like we're good. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Also just want to say thank you for inviting me to this space and having me at the table. I always say and joke with folks like people are like, "Oh, like you're a community auntie now." I'm like, "No, I'm still a community niece." Like, I had to get the invitation from the aunties to come to the table. But I guess that's the privilege and the blessing of like growing in wisdom, but also I still consider myself a community niece every day. Um, I I wish I had more time to think about some photos, but I thought about it last night. Okay, what brings me joy? And I brought a picture of myself. I think one of my birthdays. Birthdays are really important to me for myself, but also celebrating other people's birthdays. I know birthdays can be complex for some folks, but I feel like that is the day that you entered this world that we all get to experience you. So we're going to celebrate even during the times that it may not be the best time, but that is a joyful time that I try to embody for myself and my friends and my loved ones. Um, I have a picture here that I took when I was in St. Lucia with some girlfriends. One of my girlfriends, her father's from St. Lucia, her mom's from here, from Halifax, but it was my first time going with her family. I love, similar to Lana, I love being next to water. I believe that water is just very important. And as an Afro-Indigenous woman, like water is very sacred to us. And as a woman, water, I mean, when we are the folks that are considered like birthing bodies, waters in the wombs. We already have that connection before we already enter this earthly side. So anywhere in the Caribbean, I'm like, that is home for me. Um, I have a picture here of my friends. My friends are very, very important to me. I really appreciate what you said, Kai, about our friendship. I believe that our friendship is very healing. I was saying to my partner's mom yesterday, I said, I feel like this is the first time in my life where I feel so secure in my friendship where I don't have to think about like, oh, is there drama here? Is there chaos here? Like, oh, do I have to mourn this? I'm like, no, everybody is going through their things, but it's very much a community family. Like, okay, what do you need, sis? What do you need, bro? Like, I got you. Even though I'm going through my own things, I still got you as a person, right? And I have a picture here of my vinyl wall. I love music and I love records. If there's two things that can get me to like melt, it's a new vinyl and some food. Like food and vinyls would do it for me every time. I believe that music is so healing. And it's so funny because people, I don't know why people ask me this. They're like, Brie, can you sing? And here's my theory. I say, everybody can sing, just some people can't sing well. And I am one of those people, but I know who I am in life, so I'm okay with that. But I love music. I believe that music and movement is so important to our bodies. I mean, I'm sure there's folks on the call today that understand like somatic healing and what that looks like, but I believe that there's ways to incorporate that in our everyday practices. So that's really important to me, and that brings me a lot of joy. And going back to my earlier point about being a community a niece, I believe that community is where I find joy too. There's this post I saw, especially in relevance to like, being a niece that's moving into like the auntie era. You get busy and life becomes wild, and then you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm so isolated, I'm so alone. But then you realize, like, no, you still have community. And sometimes we have to be inconvenienced as an individual to make space to be a community person to someone else. But people have done that for you. And similar to what Lana was saying, it's an exchange, right? Some days you feel like, okay, I can't even show up for myself. But I know that there are people that are going to show up for me and vice versa. So that's really important for like my joy. And I'm in a space of understanding that we can live alongside of our experiences. So meaning that if I'm going through a space of hardship, a difficult season, grief, mourning, or just loss. Like those are really big feelings and processing. But I can also live inside that by saying, like, you know what, this brings me joy, and my family brings me joy, and my community brings me joy. Whatever it is, I can share those experiences and not feel guilty about it because they can coexist together. So that's what's bringing me joy today and how I'm showing up.
Well, thank you, Bria. Yeah, and I think we're gonna come back to some of these themes you're naming around community and how we hold both and the grief and the joy together. So thank you for that. And the music. And I'll share a little bit too, Tyler, if you could go to my slide. Black joy for me, very much resonating with music. So my family is from the Caribbean, from Guyana. And so, yeah, soca music is like Black joy for me, being when I get to be in spaces and just be with other Black folks and moving and dancing and like feeling that energy is so much joy. And of course, yeah, food. My Black joy smells like garlic pork and my mom's freshly made bread and all of my aunts making macaroni and always asking, well, who made it best every dinner. And yeah, getting to be in community in a very intergenerational uh, gathering with cousins and babies and granny and all the aunts and uncles, and getting to figure that out together. And similar to so many of you, travel, getting to go to other places and through that experiencing, yeah, Black joy and with other Black folks in other locations of like, what does it mean in each space and how it shows up as resistance in different ways. And here in my work here in Nova Scotia this year, so much joy came from some work I got to do around Black futures, working with many folks in the African Nova Scotian community around like, what do Black futures look like here? And again, how is that connected, a close cousin to joy? So those are just some snippets of where my joy comes from and feel so grateful and honored to be on this call with you all. And as someone who is not African Nova Scotian, I wanted to ask you, in thinking about joy, particularly within the African Nova Scotian community, what feels unique about that joy in community, and what feels important about protecting that right now in this moment that we're in?
If I can just maybe start, it's such a wonderful question, Terry, and thank you for posing it to us for deeper thought and reflection. Um, um, I, my initial thought about what is unique about us as African Nova Scotians is that it's a zero point 0.5 degree of separation. Um, I was born and raised in Cape Breton, the mainland. Halifax is my home now, but there's a particular way in which African Nova Scotians who've been here for 100 plus years, um, when and I think my Indigenous brothers and sisters would say the same thing, that what impacts one community impacts all communities, and that an incident is seen, or if there's a traumatic event or even a celebratory event, that it is a collective sharing of that experience. That I don't believe is necessarily something that you would see and experience in Ontario. But geographic, there's a geographic kind of essence of who we are that's rich in our soil, that's been tilled, that's been harvested, and that has been shared, whether you're from Cape Breton, whether you're from Amherst, the communities here in Halifax, to folks in Shelburne County. We share a collective memory. And in that collective memory, there are sweet pieces, and there are sour pieces, but there's this collective memory and collective thought and a collective care for each other, that I think is uniquely African Nova Scotian.
Yeah, I can go next, so that's okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Um, One thing I want to preface, which I didn't preface at the beginning, is even as I prepared for this panel, um, I've kind of found myself, I feel Black joy like today in our society, it's not really celebrated when we look at the makeup of our society, when we look at in our work and other places, it's not really talked about as much. So I have struggled with, for me personally, digging deep into using Black joy into and kind of framing it into self-care. So as I transition kind of these last couple years, I've kind of been really reflecting deeply on kind of what it means and have ironically, come to the conclusion that there's definitely more to learn, but that a lot of these little snippets and glimmers of Black joy um, have been presented or shown to me from ever since I was born. And I think one of the integral, unique ways about Black joy is through storytelling. So, when I think of Black joy, when I just think of our elders and, how hearing the stories from, how things were back then, and just understanding how things were different, but also being able to see the strength, um, and the power and the perseverance in the systemic oppression that was way worse than what we're experiencing right now. Um, when I think of, even when I talked about music, one of the individuals who inspired me was my grandmother who sang in the choir. And still to this day will used to play and still plays a CD of her brother singing. And just how, given that he's passed, that brings her joy and just her connection with music and his connection with music and how that shows up intergenerationally. I think, again, due to the fact that this world was not made for folks who looked like us, a lot of our history is rooted in the storytelling. And so I think a part of Black joy is also for some folks who may be 10, who may be 30, who may be 60, understanding intergenerational trauma, understanding how Black joy, you know, looks, and then kind of going through the reflection on why they didn't learn that at a young age. And the last thing I'll say is just like, which was alluded to, our deep-rooted history, right? I'm very privileged to be able to, within my lineage, have one of the first Black lawyers in Halifax, right? And to be able to hear that history, to be able to reflect on that, or just, us as individuals who are African Nova Scotian, a lot of folks ask me, where are you from? Like, how do you identify? And I'll say, African Nova Scotian. My dad's American, and I say we have Antiguan roots, but I have never been able to meet anyone from Antigua. And I learned that from my grandmother, right? So, I think part of Black joy too is us indirectly finding who we are and where we come from, um, and just celebrating and continuing to share the story, across provinces, internationally, and just our rich.
I'm sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead, Kaija.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I think for me, Black joy is sometimes hidden even in sight for us. And what I mean by that is I'll be 60 in 2 years. So my birthday's coming up April 4th. I like to be celebrated, y'all. But but for me, when I think about Black joy and Black love, sometimes again, kissing cousins, we do it and it's hidden and we have in plain sight for us. So I give an example. My grandmother and my mother found so much joy in spending time with me braiding my hair. And I knew I was loved. I knew I was cared for. And there was time for storytelling. It was time for laughter with a little hurting me and a knock on your knuckles when you went to move, right? So there are these moments of Black joy that we haven't really claimed that are so in our present sight, like Black joy is humming and rocking to an old spiritual, yet we are looking for joy sometimes in a way that I think is colonized in our brains instead of we're decolonizing it and looking for it in the moments. So I'm mindful, like you said, Kaisha, that the storytelling it's in our presence, and how storytelling is told from my generation to yours is slightly different to how it's being told to my daughter, because technology informs how those things are happening. But at the root of it, I think for me as a Black woman, Black joy has always been found at the feet of Black women and in the church pew. And those are moments that we are sacred to us, but we don't always claim them as joy. We're looking for joy to be these big things, when in fact, the intimacies of Black joy, we don't even take notice of sometimes. So slowing ourselves down, to watch the joy of watching a baby with being held and passed around in community. Joy. We just think of it as cultural and tradition and don't interrogate it as a ways of how we experience healing. And in those really small moments, when we look and kiss on people, when we see them and hold them in our hands, Black joy. And I want to just say we're three Black women who are in this space together, or four. I'm sorry, Terry, but I forgot about you for a moment. But as I wanted just to note, when we were talking yesterday, we are missing the diverse voice of gender diverse Black folks in this room and in this space, and we're missing the voice of Black men whose experiences of Black joy are very different and nuanced, like from a place of gender. And I look at my husband, who I think finds the most joy when he's getting to sing. You see him and you can hear him when he's in church. I mean, he finds that to be his healing place. It's the balm in Gilead for him, in addition to being around the family table. So not to speak for Black men, but they find joy on the basketball court, right? being in their bodies physically and being with each other in these spiritual entanglements and loving moments that are joshing and ripping on each other. But I do want to acknowledge that their places of joy are very sacred and nuanced as ours are as Black women who are in this space together.
Thank you for bringing that in, Lana, and both the that piece of reclaiming, and as you were saying, Kai, I was just like, yeah, looking at my life and claiming these moments that exist in the day to day, and also presencing like the many different types of Black joy and perspectives around that. And the piece I'm also sitting with too is, and I've been noticing in my own life around Black joy and embodiment of like these moments of like embodied practice of being in connection, and how that moves, connects me to my body in these moments that in this current time we are in can be challenging to feel a lot of the oppression, the grief, the other things we're carrying, and so how we find it in those moments with each other.
And I think clinically, if I can, before Bria, I'll let you, certainly pop in. I think when we talk about somatic as a clinician, I'm like, how do we, looking at somatic-based treatment modalities, having the opportunity to see how recreation and leisure are such an important part of our healing as Black folk, and having access to those places and spaces. There's this beautiful exhibit at Dalhousie's Art Gallery right now on the expression of Black movement and dance as places of healing and narratives. And it's a Canadian exhibit going across different provinces, and how Black dance was like hidden and had its own places where celebration took place. I dance as I talk about it, but movement in our bodies. And when we are when Black men are imprisoned, there's no a lot of space for movement. Or even when we are expressing ourselves as Black folk, we're all in our bodies, and people can see that as oppositional, taking up space, or being assertive, or be us, that we are a danger, or people are threatened by our space. And our space is about expression and joy and owning how we speak with our hands and movement with our body. And when that's taken away and othered, we become less, and we become contained, and it becomes toxic in our bodies. So looking at how we naturally use somatic kind of ways of being to heal, and how that has become problematic or othered in society, impacts how Black joy shows up. Just like how parenting has been prescribed to us as, as not good enough parenting, when our parenting practices are, you don't see the joy in them, And so anyway, I just have these places of like who we are as Kaija said earlier. Those spaces aren't always are seen as healing, but for us, culture, movement, dance, family, food are all those healing pieces, but it all centers around our interconnectedness and across generation.
I love that piece, Lana, in terms of that too. And thank you, Kai, for also sharing your parts as well. I feel like mine's a bit of like a combination of you both as well. I think about in terms of like preserving. I'm a millennial and I work with a lot of like Gen Zs and younger generations. And when I'm talking to them and I'm asking them like, oh, like your African Nova Scotian roots, a lot of them don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, who's your parents? And then I gotta do what the auntie just did to me, like, well, who's your mother? Who's your father? Right? I'm like, oh, I know your father. So and so is your cousin. I'm like, okay, right? But a lot of them don't know. And I'm like, okay, so I grew up knowing or hearing stories, like Lana was saying, like, well, this person's related to this person, and that person's married to this person, and they're from this community. And at the time, you didn't think of it as like, this is Black joy, but you just kept like a mental box of it. And then as you grow up, you're like, well, I know that person because they're related to that person, right? And one thing that I've been doing that's bringing me a lot of joy is doing more genealogy of my lineage. Like, okay, so who was where at what time? Because I want to be able to pass down to my future generations, my future bloodline. Okay, this is your great 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 grandmother, and they came over through this migration, and then they married this person, and they have kids over here. So I want to be able to pass that down. And I think that's such a privilege and magic that mentally we were keeping little capsules of it, but it's something that's walking history that we're going to need to pass down to our lineages and our future generations and to educate people on why it's so important to recognize the uniqueness and the distinctness of African Nova Scotians in a time right now when people are pulling budgets, don't want to define us. We have the neighboring countries excluding DEI work, like they can't even say the word black students. Like we are so privileged right now, but still fighting for to have it for a very long time to say African Nova Scotians. And I find it's a privilege and it brings me joy when I go into spaces and I say, well, I'm an African Nova Scotian woman, and people are like, well, what is that? I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to educate you. This is going to bring me a lot of joy, right? But at the same time, there's lots of resources, and maybe you can come to our province to understand what we mean about African Nova Scotian, right? And it brings me joy when I invite people to my province and say, okay, when you get here, let me know. We got to take you over here. We got to take you over there. And then we're going to feed you. We're going to love on you. And many folks that are newcomers, especially Black folks that visit here, and they get that authentic African Nova Scotian experience, they always say, I felt at home here.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. Like that's how our magic is. Like we are a homey community family. Now, similar to what you were saying, we're cousins, so we're gonna have disputes, we're gonna have arguments, we're gonna have disagreements, but at the end of the day, like as our aunts and grandmothers said, like sit down and stop acting up. What is the real problem here, right? And we used to think of it as like scolding, but realistically, it was collective accountability of you don't argue with your cousin, you don't fight with your brother, right? You don't talk, you do not talk to your sister for like 10 years, right? And those things are real for many people for many reasons, but I think the way I was brought up as a millennial, I grew up with boomer parents. So that was really important to me and still is. And I also think about the importance of land. It brings me a lot of joy to see so many people doing the land titles, getting their ownership, because again, historically, these are lands and places for our 52 historical Black communities that we have to preserve. Like, I don't want to be a senior and then my kids not know about them, not have the a privilege to visit them. Like, even if I was to move tomorrow and come back 30 years from now, I want to be able to show my family, yes, we come from a place of historical land where our ancestors built them up. And these are places that we were given that were impoverished places that they worked so hard for to give us a bloodline. So that brings me joy to say that I'm an African Nova Scotian. I say all the time, I'm so glad. And I hope in every lifetime, I can come back as an African Nova Scotian person because I take so much pride in that.
Thank you, Bria. Yeah, and hearing I really like feel that what you're naming of the uniqueness in the African Nova Scotia community of like these degrees of separation, the interdependence that exists, and how that allows for this collective accountability, and also how it's so richly connected to history, to the land here, and to have that pride and joy come through and like and being connected to a long legacy and to knowing folks that's not accessible for other Black folks from other, being separated from our communities in all the ways. So it's such a, yeah, I feel like you all really captured the elements of that unique Black joy. And as we're kind of coming towards the end of our main course, I'm curious in thinking about the ways, yeah, we've been naming like how this shows up in the day to day and like these practices of reclaiming and just noticing, bringing intention to naming like, oh yeah, this is here in these moments. How can I access that when it's needed? Or how can I be in connection with others when I can't access it? Because it's not, we can't always have those moments. So I'm curious, yeah, how you all would reflect on how does Black joy show up in the practice as healing and helping professionals? Um, and how can we, yeah, how do we hold that with the tension of also recognizing the systems that we're in?
I can go.
Um,
Oh,
go ahead, Kai.
okay. Yeah, so for me, I think community is really important. Connecting, networking, um, being in community. Um, and I think, with the makeup of our society and what has happened, um, it's something that we have always done, but there's been certain Eurocentric policies and practices that have kind of tried to put like a divide. So for me, one of the things that I'm trying to do is really connect with community. And so that would be our African Nova Scotian community, but also really trying to foster that tension and repair that relationship with our individuals of African descent um, who've immigrated here and really being able to, share stories of both of our histories to really come together. Um, so that's one of the things that I'm really trying my best to embody. Um, and I'm only really one person, but I feel like collectively as a community, there's power in numbers, there's power in our community coming together really to kind of do this. So for me, I think that's really important. And, really sharing again the glimmers of what we kind of talked about is what does Black joy look like? Um, in both of our communities, but really coming together to say what are the similarities, how, and just kind of meshing it all together, which indirectly happens. Um, Also, I feel like with me, depending on, for a lot of us, we're one of a few individuals of African descent in our work. So, when it comes to in prac when we're talking about in practice, for me, I'm really trying to really focus on my community and what brings me joy, Black joy in my daily life, to really be able to show up as my authentic self, even when there are times when my voice may be silenced or my history may not be understood and there's harm. So I think that those for me are two big things. And, like I mentioned, through music, but also I think, and Lana mentioned it too, but just with our Black men, like I'm very privileged to have a partner and really um, love Black love. I think there's a special sense of healing towards that for me. And finding my person, finding the person who gets me for me and who I'm able to embody that Black love with, or I'm able to see kind of how Black love shows up in his life, with him being Nigerian, really helps give me that fuel I need to fill my cup to really go forward.
I can go. I was going to say, in terms of like helping and like healing and doing this work as social work practitioners, but also like just social service professionals. Um, the idea of decolonizing is so important, I feel, and even this idea of like allyship. Um, I know during COVID, I felt like allyship was like a buzzword that everybody was like flying around. I'm like, but what does that really mean? And how are you actually doing it? Are you doing it with good intention, or are you doing it to check off a box to say that, oh, and I'm an ally, right? I don't believe that it's this loud, boastful thing. I think it's those corners of work that you're doing to actually enhance or advance the social justice movement, right? I say to my colleagues and peers all the time, this all sounds good when I'm in the room. Like, it's you're selling to me, great. But when I leave this room, what are you doing? What is the work that's really being done? And if I'm not at the table or anybody that looks like me is at the table, that should be considered a problem, right? I think about that, and I even think about, again, the decolonizing what we were historically taught in this profession, because research has shown it's rooted in many things that do not benefit Black folks, Black joy at all. So, and we're expected to do this in our profession. So it's like a contradicting thing of, well, how do we exist in this if the system in our profession is set up for us not to experience or have Black joy? It's like combating and fighting against it, right? So I believe we're doing this work, whether we're doing it in a collective or myself as an individual, I believe like I have a responsibility to um, find Black joy in my work while also decolonizing this work, right? And having those difficult conversations with folks to say, like, how do we create more spaces for Black people not to survive, to thrive and have Black joy around them and have more spaces for them to feel better in their bodies, their overall well-being, and in their communities. Right now, if I had the answer, I would give it to you all today. We can all go out in the world and make it happen today, right? But like, there's not a universal answer. I believe it's continuing intentional work to make it happen. I believe in the African probe work, we'll go farther together than we will alone. It's going to take community, as Kaisha said, it's going to take collective responsibility, collective accountability, and collective joy. As I mentioned earlier, we can live alongside of an experience, right? When things are being difficult, okay, we can talk about that. But, let's also celebrate these little wins. Let's also talk about this is also happening because that is healing practices for us, right? As somebody that's completing their placement right now in my graduate studies, I find it's a privilege and an honor to sit on the other side of a client and them share to me their deepest and darkest things that they're experiencing, right? And when I'm having these conversations with folks, I don't take any of that lightly, right? Like that's healing work. But I also think about, okay, historically, how has healing and therapeutic spaces centered Blackness, right? And it's like, okay, well, actually, we have these glimmers in our community. It is this kitchen table talk when we're talking to our family about things that are happening, right? It is those times that after at a repast when we talk about like family things that come up, those are healing spaces too. And I don't think it's not in all cases it's helpful to bridge this or merge the gap of historical, therapeutic, or clinical spaces and bring them in our community. I think it can be either or, but also making room that makes sense to not dismiss or disminimize the Black experience when we're coming to these spaces, but to let folks know that they are the expert in their personal lived experience. And if they're coming to you for help, whether it's a therapeutic lens, a social service, a policy, a resource, whatever it is. If they're coming to you, they're coming to you with their own lived experience. They're coming to you with what they know, what they've endured, right? So for us to say that we're the masters over them, that's not what the work that we should be doing. It's okay, I recognize this is a problem for you. This is probably a problem for many people in your community. How do we start and tackle that problem? Not me saying, here's what I think you should do, go out and do it. Because I'm the expert and you do what I say. It's like, no, that's not how we do things in our community, at least, right? And that's not going to bring joy. It's not, it's going to bring resistance. It's going to bring pushback. It's going to bring backlash. So, yeah, I think getting to the root of these things, addressing them, naming them, defining them, and making space for Black folks to do what they need to do, because I do believe everything that we need is in our communities. We just got to find a way to mobilize and organize and, like I said, have collective cousin talks to get there. Um, and I think it will advance even in our practice as practitioners.
I just want to highlight a few things that Bria had spoken to, and as well as Kaisha. I'm teaching at Waterloo right now in the master's level program, a couple of classes around, and I've had the privilege over the last, oh my goodness, maybe 15 years of working with the Mi'kmaq community around reconceptualizing child welfare assessments and child welfare practices. Um, in a Mi'kmaq community, which is very humbling and very honoring. And it was a 5-year walk with them. So the process is very intentional. So I want to kind of, for the folks around who are on the call, who are in private practice or in doing mental health work, that's kind of the lens in which I sit and am embedded in. So one of the things I remind practitioners in their learning and kind of deconstructing colonialist practices and structures is, how do you set up your assessment? So and I think what are the questions that you want to ask, and how do you want to ask those questions that are culturally responsive and can actually concurrently be very healing opportunity for people to explore with you in a moment of time. So like my little gem is, don't ask people like who, tell me about your family of origin. Like that's just a white way of talking about certain things. It's really about who raised you, what community were you from, who were the people who have been helpful, and who are the people that have been like some of the you got a little rub against. Who are your chosen family? So expanding what we have been taught from a very colonized way, what family family structures look like. So family system structure, we need to reconceptualize what that means in our teaching and within our own assessment processes. And so shifting certain things, and not being as rote when you do assessments. I'm always saying one of the tricks of being able to do good assessments with people, particularly Black folk, is we are trained to be very specific about getting data points instead of being very intentional with creating relationship. And relationship in Black folk, when we're talking clinically, is also about trust. Now, I don't trust you the way you think I should trust you, but I can walk a path with you in a way that allows you and I to get the information you need to help build a culturally responsive treatment plan. So using echograms, actually the best way I have, and I've stopped really working with adolescents because I have one right now. So I'm a generation, I don't know what I am anymore. There's too many generations, but I'm raising a generation alpha kid. So I'm a 58-year-old parent with a 16-year-old child. So having that bridge of humility to know there are certain things that I don't know about her generation, and that it has to be a co-teaching moment. So if you're looking to walk in to develop good clinical practice with people of African ancestry, particularly African Nova Scotians, it will be a co-relationship building. And it's not, like Bria said, there's no expert in the room. It's a co-shared experience, but you need to know, as the practitioner, you have to be able to frame things in ways that make meaning, that is culturally reflective. So, one of my questions that I ask in my assessments is like, hey, growing up, my nickname was Lana Banana. Like, did you have a nickname, and where is its origin from? So getting family origin and folklore really helps build capacity around how people are going to open and explain to you certain ways in which their family construction takes place. And then I do genograms and show off cutoff points and intergenerational points. And so using genograms as a way of giving cultural expression, and as Bria said, helping people connect to their family of origin and their rootedness here. So I find if you use it in a way that allows for you to have an understanding, and not just a conventional way of understanding what a genogram can do, genograms can actually create meaning for people and connectedness. And, I always include in my treatment planning the use of not just narrative-based work, but narrative-based work that's connected from a healing perspective with the use of arts and culture. With the use of sport, with that there has to be some body movement, there has to be some connectedness to faith. And we're not taught to talk about people around religion. Don't talk to not a Black person I know who's at least over the age of 25 if you can't talk about Jesus. If you cannot understand the importance of faith and culture and practice as part of the narrative of people's stories and heritage, then you're missing an opportunity to find out how Black joy shows up. So part of your formulation should also be inquisitive for those of you who are in the room who may not ask the questions about faith or religious practice. I always say spiritual practices. And if the person doesn't have that connection to the conventional church, I also say, where do you find that? Is it through any particular kind of music? So certainly, rap, hip hop, there's a cultural element to that, that is about rootedness in faith and social resistance and resilience. Rap is nothing but about a movement. And if we only think about rap in its conventional ways around misogyny, that's a different kind of rap in spoken word. So I always say clinically, your assessment needs to be very fluid, and you have to pivot in between and not just try to get the facts. So when I ask about housing, I'm like, well, oh, in whose home were you raised? And who helped raise you? As Kayeja said, her grandmother was a co-parent in her life, as well as her birth parents, right? So, and I'm trained in dialectical therapy, and I love dialectics because Black people are full of dialectics. This and that can be true at the same time. So being able to interrogate dialectically what's happening and where people are sitting, because to be Black in this society, you have to be able to code switch. You have to be able to do multiple things. And you may want to recognize or not recognize, but give some consideration about whether or not you're code switching with your client, or if your client is code switching with you to make you comfortable in the space, because you may not have the race-based literacy to help them facilitate things. And if you don't have that, it's okay to say, hey, I know Elaine O'Coin is on this call, I believe, and Elaine and I went to school together many, many moons ago. And the IWK now has an Afrocentric youth treatment program for youth and families. That team is an opportunity to do consultation to enhance your practice. Don't just send Black kids and families to that team. Take it as an opportunity to humble yourself, to learn and scale up your skill and do consultation. And that in and amongst itself is a personal challenge and change that allows for systemic change within your practice and within the organization. And I work at the North End Community Health Center. This is my last hurrah in terms of doing the work I want to do with intention. And as an administrator, it's been a privilege to actually look at policy change that reflects the needs of the staff that we work here to support. So for our Black staff, Indigenous staff, and all of our staff, because they're unionized, we have intentionally said, in these particular communities, we've expanded bereavement leave for aunties, cousins, community members. So recently we had the passing of Mr. Carvery. So for folks who had that connectedness to him, who were not biologically related, but he was a community member, we honor that. So our staff had 2 days off to honor who he was. So that's a policy change. We also have cultural days here for people to take a cultural day off, whatever that means for them. So for members of our 2S LGBTQ community and our trans community, they may take a different day off than I might take. But I think policy speaks volumes, as those of us who are in this room who are administrators, about how you want to create sacred, healing, joyful spaces that honors and reflects the needs of your staff. And creating space for that you may not know what's happening. So I think that brings me joy, is when we are humble enough to say, how do I do better?
Thank you so much, Lana, Bria, Kaija. So many different elements you're bringing in here, appreciating thinking about this from the different scopes of how we can do this intra-community and across our diaspora relationships, and then also in relationship as allies and in the practice. I love what you're naming, Lana, of like even just the question we ask, such a simple reframing that can elicit both the joy and connection and build steps towards trust and how we think about policy at the other end. So my belly is feeling full from this delicious meal on Black joy, and so want to give folks an opportunity to digest, for a moment. So we'll take a break and come back at 1 with my math, 1 in 10 minutes. So 1:38. 1:38, we'll play some music, come back, and then when you come back, we'll have a bit of time in small discussion groups so you can share with others like what are you taking from this? What is sitting with you? Thank you all for coming to this course.